Let's move on and talk about Big Ten title contender tiers. I looked at both of our tier lists, and they're pretty similar. So I think how we should do this is we should just go tier by tier. You have 4 tiers, I have 5, but my 5th tier is basically just a little bit of extra, more specific bashing of the bad teams in the Big Ten, whereas your D tier is just a whole lot larger. So let's start with the A tier because it's the exact same. I'll let you introduce the teams. We both have 3, and I don't think that there's very many surprises or very many controversial takes coming with our A tier.
Yeah, I don't even have them in any particular order. I think Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana are that solid A tier. I'm not going to move Indiana out of the A tier regardless of all this outside noise. Can they do it again? Again, Andrew, you said it on your own show. I'm not picking against Indiana until I see them lose. That was my problem last year when I was following the team. I picked them to lose at Penn State in a shocker. I know Penn State wasn't, they weren't great last year, but, going on the road. And, you just mentioned it. A couple of things go wrong for Indiana's schedule last year. They could have lost those games, that last drive at Iowa, Penn State. So I have Indiana firmly in that A tier. But Oregon, they're returning a lot of those guys. Dante Moore, when you return a starting quarterback, I think that ultimately will put you pretty far up on my list. But also, when you have a team like Dan Lanning has, I think it's probably the most talented roster, maybe second to Notre Dame right now in terms of returnees. And then Ohio State. I think Ohio State is pretty much going to be an A-tier type of program for the next 10 years. I think they have been for the past 15. So Julian saying Jeremiah Smith, that's a tough offense. And then, you have to replace a lot on defense for Ohio State, but I still have a ton of confidence in Matt Patricia. I think it's almost run like an NFL organization there in Columbus right now, but those are my top 3.
Sweet. Yeah, I have the same top 3, Indiana, Oregon, Ohio State. I believe they're top 3 in the odds at FanDuel as well to win the Big Ten Championship. And those odds, it's Ohio State at 1, Indiana 2, and Oregon 3. I basically, on the Andrew Garrison Show's most recent episode, I basically ranted for 25 minutes about how Indiana's good, which, isn't that outrageous to say. But if you're an Indiana fan watching, which there's probably at least one of you since we're obviously both Indiana beat reporters, that could potentially get you a little bit fired up. And that's actually, just to go back to the Hoover point very briefly, I like the way you phrased something just now because you said that if the Iowa game, the Penn State game, 2 games that were near losses for Indiana, if those go a little bit differently, maybe they're still in the playoff, maybe they still win a national championship, but it'd be a much more difficult path to do so. Maybe you're going on the road to Oklahoma in order to just get advance to play in the Rose Bowl or something like that. And so I guess the question with Hoover is, well, we had Mendoza, who turned out to be the number 1 NFL pick in the draft. If you're an Indiana fan, you're thinking to yourself, we had Mendoza, and he was able to get us out of those situations. And same with Omar Cooper Jr. if you look at the Penn State game. But is Josh Hoover and is Nick Marsh, are they capable of doing potentially the same thing? If you take this roster and put them in last season's schedule, we just don't know if this is a 16-year national championship team. I guess that's the point. We don't know. And I guess they'll have their opportunity to prove to us that this is also a 16-year national championship team. We'll just have to find out. But Ohio State, Indiana, Oregon, it's my top 3. I love Dante Moore. He, Brooks, our high school, he played in high school, he played against our high school, at our high school. And we went to a high school in a different state from what he did. He went to Martin Luther King Jr. High School up in Detroit. And I think you were there. I don't remember the story. I know I was there.
That was one of the most insane games I've ever seen. But also, remember, key part of that game, obviously, Carmel High School won on that Hail Mary. But key part of that game, Dante Moore was absolutely phenomenal. I became a Dante Moore fan from that day because he threw for almost 500 yards, something crazy like that.
It was definitely over 400. I don't remember the number.
Yeah, it was absurd. He's really, really good. And don't take this dark cloud of Dante Moore playing against Indiana because, the 2 losses last year. Don't take that as if, Dante Moore is still a great quarterback. He could have been the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. He decided to return. He's probably making a lot of money in NIL, which probably makes good sense right now why he's back. But I think he and Oregon, it's a pretty stacked roster. I think they have enough to win a national championship, but that program has never done it. So could there be some external factors too, just holding that program in Eugene back? I don't even know, but we'll see this year.
Yeah, you can take the Oregon team from last year, and then, as you mentioned, Dante Moore could have been the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. So let's take Oregon from last year. Obviously, some offseason changes, some NFL players, some transfer portal additions and departures.
They lost
and then
both their coordinators.
Yeah, and then let's add the number 2 pick in the NFL. Let's add an NFL rookie to that. Is potentially what they're looking at. They're potentially playing with the equivalent of an NFL quarterback already, because he could have been in the NFL right now. He's not. He came back. He's going to be all the better for it. I think his chances of having an awesome NFL career are so much higher, which is kind of awesome because, I also decided I love Dante Moore, probably partially because Carmel ended up winning that game. I'm sure I'd feel differently if that ended 40-36 instead of 42-40. That was the best moment of my life for like 5 years. Like I held on to that for a very long time. I was a film and equipment manager for our high school football team for 3 years, and that was the second game I was ever at. Freshman in high school, that was my welcome to high school moment. I'm like running around, losing my mind. But Dante Moore was awesome.
Was absurd. Yeah, that was absurd. I became a Dante Moore fan from that day. I'll move it to the B tier part of the conversation here. I have Penn State. I think Penn State has a very favorable schedule. Matt Campbell, his first year in Happy Valley. Obviously, we know how the James Franklin era ended. They got so close so many times, they just couldn't get over that hump. Matt Campbell, in my opinion, he's one of the best coaches in all of college football. He's a program builder. He knows what it takes, and I think what he's been able to do actually on the recruiting trail, he's gotten some key guys, he's leading in some key recruitments, and that's what it takes. You have to build the program with the recruiting, but also with the culture, a culture change. He brings over a ton of transfers from Iowa State, also a lot of coaches. And Iowa State, remember, it's a program who they were consistently in contention for the Big 12 championship almost every single year. Matt Campbell turned down bigger jobs before. He was offered the USC job before Lincoln Riley. He was offered the Michigan job. He turned it down. He really appreciated and loved everything about Ames, Iowa. But I think it's super, super, super exciting to see Matt Campbell get this opportunity in Happy Valley, an opportunity that he couldn't turn down because that coaching search for Penn State was really dragging on. I have Washington, I have USC, and I have Michigan, also another school with a brand new head coach in Kyle Whittingham, the oldest head coach in college football, but also he's a winner too. So I don't think you can discount Michigan. They do have to play Oklahoma at home this year. Again, they lost last year, so I think that's going to be another one of these fun games here early on in the non-conference. But Washington and USC, don't sleep on those West Coast teams in the Big Ten. I think Washington's going to have a lot better of a year this year. And USC, they both return starting quarterbacks. So I think that's going to be super fun.
Absolutely. Our B tiers there are the same. I called it the A tier true title contenders. I called the B tier possible playoff picture factors. Where all 4 of these teams, if they're not in the playoff and if they're never in the top 12 to begin with, they're at least going to be in the mix and in conversation, I think, at some point over the course of the season, or at least have a very strong chance of doing so. You made a good point about Penn State. I'm really fascinated by all this Matt Campbell stuff. I kind of became in my peak, sophomore year of high school about a few years ago, I went to the Penn State Wildcat game. I wasn't a bandwagon Penn State fan. I just really appreciated Penn State from afar and was hoping that program obviously lifted itself to the next level, which I think is a pretty common opinion, a pretty common stance. So I'm interested to see if Penn State actually can do that. I thought they were doing that 2 years ago when they made the semifinal. I thought potentially this was at last the chance that Penn State could have to make it to that national championship game and potentially beyond. Indiana plays 3 of the teams in this tier, USC, Michigan, and Washington. And I think that's part of the point with Indiana's schedule where, you could say it's an automatic Big Ten championship berth again, because even if this team loses to Ohio State, they'll be able to beat everybody else. They're in the Big Ten championship game, and off they go from there. And maybe that's true. But also, any one of or all of USC, Michigan, and Washington could just hit and become, one of those teams that launches itself to the 8 or 9 seed in the playoff and really causes some problems. kind of like Indiana did last year, I suppose. You were talking about Illinois last year as a team that could potentially do that as well. USC is kind of like a better version of Wisconsin to me because it's the same situation where they have a coach that they expected to really take the program to the next level, and it's been a few years, and now like we're kind of waiting to see if it's actually going to happen, and this could potentially be a make or break year. I think it is for Wisconsin. We'll see what it's like for Lincoln Riley at USC, but that's potentially a team. I mean, our guy Noah Gurkey, who we cover Indiana with, loves the quarterback there at Mayava. So USC potentially is one of those teams that could launch towards the A tier. Michigan, as always. Washington, I just love. I'll never stop. I know they had some interesting situations with the quarterback there at Washington over the course of the offseason. The quarterback didn't want to be there. He's still there. We'll see how that pans out. Kind of reminds me of the Jaylen Brown situation in the NBA. Yeah, totally. And that was kind of the first. I mean, before that was kind of the baby Brendan Sorsby situation. They're completely different and completely unrelated. But when that was happening, I was paying attention to it like I am now with the Brendan Sorsby situation. The only thing is, I'm just so tired of all the Brendan Sorsby stuff. I'm ready for it to get.
Also, let's preface Damon Williams didn't do anything wrong in the eyes of the law. Also, he just, I mean, these new contracts with NIL, we figured out that they're not enforceable, but they came to an agreement, and Damon Williams will be back with the Huskies, which I think he's just such an explosive quarterback. He can run the ball as well. So when Indiana visits Seattle second to last week of the year, I think that's definitely a tough game for the Hoosiers. Going on the road and playing in Husky Stadium, that's a loud stadium. They always, in Washington, they have a lot of rain. Weather plays a factor in it, and that game is that's the one I have circled on my schedule, not because I'm just excited to go there, but also I think it could be one of the better games of the college football season in total. But I'll move on a little bit. Let's not get too sidetracked. The C tier for me, Iowa. I mean, they're always consistently pretty good, but consistently in that middle tier. They've taken a step back the past couple of years, I think, especially after the Big Ten has scrapped this system where, the East, the West, the leaders, the legends, there's not really a real way I think Iowa can sneak into that Big Ten conference championship anymore unless they make a huge step up. But I have them in that C tier. Illinois, Brett Bielema, Nebraska, Matt Rule again. I think this is a big year for Nebraska as well. So also, like you mentioned, Luke Fickell, make or break for Luke Fickell. If something doesn't go right in these first 6 weeks, obviously they have a tough week one opponent. If something doesn't go right in the first 6 weeks, I think he could be a midseason fire. It just has not worked out. He's a great coach. He took Cincinnati to the college football playoff, but we haven't seen that level of success at Wisconsin. I think he's tried to change that. Like Wisconsin's just a run the ball type of hard-nosed football program. Luke Fickell's kind of tried to change their identity, so we'll see if they can get back to it this year. But UCLA rounds out that C tier for me. New coach, new program. They really desperately needed it after the past couple of years with Deshaun Foster. They needed a change. They got a change, and I'm super excited for UCLA as well.
If I'm cross-checking our C tiers correctly, they're mostly the same. We have one team that's different. I have Minnesota in this tier, and you have Wisconsin. I have Wisconsin one step down. I think we'll know in week one about Wisconsin, and I think we'll know about Luke Fickell in week one. Obviously, they have Notre Dame in Lambeau, and that is a very Wisconsin-friendly place. Obviously, it's in Wisconsin, and if that's 50-10, like we've seen some week one results for Wisconsin in very recent years past, albeit against great programs, maybe that's our answer pretty much right away. And I think Notre Dame certainly has a roster capable of taking advantage of Wisconsin in that way. Iowa I love, and Iowa and USC were two that came to mind where I was thinking, well, maybe USC I'm having the B tier, not the C tier, just based on recent results, just because it's USC and just because of the name brand and because of some of the names over there compared to someone like Iowa. I named my C tier up-and-coming teams. Perhaps that's why you have Wisconsin in there and I have Minnesota, because Wisconsin, I think, is headed in the wrong direction, which is what my D tier is called. And Minnesota, I also really like just across the board. Obviously, PJ Fleck, a program that is pretty comfortable with where it's at. Nebraska, I think up and coming, potentially has a lot of upside. UCLA, we saw some trends in the right direction in the second half of the season with UCLA. Obviously, the Penn State game had a lot to do with that. I trust Brett Bielema. I like Brett Bielema. I think Illinois is, albeit slower than Indiana, I think also ascending to some degree. And but again, the Big Ten's so convoluted at the top. It's going to be really difficult, as you mentioned with Iowa. Not even just from a standings perspective to pick up the big wins necessary to ascend to a Big Ten championship game or anything like that, but kind of that power structure at the top. You've got Ohio State, you've got Oregon, Michigan is up there, Penn State's probably up there, USC and Washington are trying to break in, Indiana has already broken in, but there's going to be a point where if you have seven, if all seven of those teams are great, you can't have 8 really awesome teams in the Big Ten, and if you do have 8 really awesome teams in the Big Ten, then a few of them are 8-4, 7-5, and you're just back to where you were before. I think the Big Ten obviously is potentially a little bit top heavy, and I think it's difficult for that top to get any heavier, I suppose is the way to say it. So that's my C tier. Looks like we have a lot of agreement there. The one, I just like Minnesota. I'm sure you'll have good things to say or bad things to say about Minnesota when you get to them in your D tier.
I think in my D tier, obviously the first team I had listed was Minnesota. I struggled with it because I really love PJ Fleck and Minnesota and everything that he's done in his coaching career. I just think that Minnesota and Northwestern and Michigan State, Rutgers, Maryland, Purdue, like you said, the Big Ten's kind of a top-heavy conference, and those teams in my D tier, they're honestly not bad teams on paper. I just think the past couple of years what we've seen in the Big Ten is those bottom-tier teams, they beat each other up, and there's not one team in that second, third tier who stands out to, move up. I think Minnesota, they have always been battling, right around trying to fight for bowl eligibility. And those teams in that tier list that D tier that I just named, they're going to be scrapping for wins in conference play. They're going to need to win games in the non-conference. And then when they play each other in the regular season, a win against another team in that tier could potentially mean bowl eligibility at the end of the year. A loss, you're skating around 3 or 4 wins on the season. So I think that's where I put Minnesota. I think they're probably a better team than the rest of the teams that I listed just now. But, it's the fact, will the other teams beat them up? I mean, you have to win these games in conference play. I really do like Michigan State, by the way. I love the hire of Pat Fitzgerald. I just think it's going to take a little bit more time. We saw what he did at Northwestern. He took that Northwestern team, I felt like it was almost every other year, into relevance. He put Northwestern, I believe it was 2020, in the Big Ten championship game. 2 years before that, they were in the Big Ten championship game. And those were some pretty solid Northwestern football teams. Now he's at Michigan State after that long break and the lawsuit. He's back, and Michigan State's a good place. I think he's the guy to return them to that place that they were in with Mark D'Antonio. Obviously, probably not winning the Rose Bowl or playing in these, they made the college football playoff, but I think Pat Fitzgerald is one of those better coaches in college football who can get them back at least to relevance in the Big Ten Conference.
Sweet. I have my D tier is split into 2. I got the D tier and I've got the F tier. The D tier is called headed in the wrong direction. If they're not actually trending downwards, they're at least definitely not trending upwards over the course of this season. I have Wisconsin there, who I think is actually going in the wrong direction. And then I have Maryland and Northwestern, who I think are more likely just kind of stuck in a spot that they're not going to elevate. Maybe they won't, be 1-8 or 0-9 like we saw, teams like Purdue last year. But they're at least not in a good place. That's the D tier. F tier is called pack it up. This is most of my my tier list has to do with kind of a little bit, it's zoomed out a little bit more. We're looking at the programs. We're looking at a little bit more of a trajectory over time. But this F tier is just looking at this season. This is my no redeeming qualities category, which is obviously an exaggeration, but this is I could see no world. Northwestern could pick up a nice win against Minnesota, for example, or like Rutgers could lose by 2.5 touchdowns to Indiana, but look really strong, and their fans could be really proud of that. Wisconsin could obviously have a great coach, have or in theory, a great coach and have an infrastructure that potentially could be worth something. These teams, I think, just as you mentioned, Pat Fitzgerald is in a good place, but this season, it's just not going to happen. It's Purdue, it's Rutgers, and it's Michigan State, who I think will, unless one, I don't know exactly, but if one of those teams plays the other two, maybe they have 2 wins. But other than that, I think it's kind of an automatic win, barring disaster from Wisconsin, Maryland, or Northwestern for everyone else in the Big Ten. And we'll see a lot of 8s and 9s at the end, at the bottom of the Big Ten standings with those teams involved. It's just not going to happen this year. I believe they'll build themselves back. Purdue, another team that was in the Big Ten championship game, not recently. Rutgers obviously has plenty of work to do, and Michigan State as well, a team that was in the Big Ten championship game relatively recently. And obviously, in that Mel Tucker year, that strange, I guess 2021, that strange Mel Tucker year where for a second there we thought Michigan State might be a playoff team. That is not overly, that's about 5 years ago now. It'd be 5 seasons ago by the time we start this season, a little bit later on. Some Big Ten title tiers, some Big Ten contender tiers this season. That'll be interesting to watch play out over the course of the season, particularly in the B tier. I think that's what's going to be most fascinating moving forward.